Hare Krishna devotees, a very warm welcome back to our continuing lectures on the glories of Sri Vrindavan Dham. We would begin with obeisances to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarane. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, at the end of our last lecture, we said that we had exhausted all the material available on Krishna in Mathura. But afterwards I did a little more research and I realized that actually there's more to discuss. So you could say in principle this would be a Mathura part 3. So we concluded the last lecture with Krishna's killing Kamsa. And actually Kamsa knew it was all coming for two reasons. Number one, he was warned by a voice from the sky while driving his sister Devaki home from her wedding that her 8th son would be his death, source of his death. And also I read that Narada Muni had also explicitly told him the same thing. Narada Muni's saying that to Kamsa is described in chapter 39 of the Krishna book. Prabhupada writes that after Krishna killed Aristasura, Narada Muni visited Kamsa in Mathura and reiterated what the Akashvani, or the voice from the sky, had said. He told Kamsa, and I'm quoting, you were definitely going to be killed by the 8th son of Vasudev. And Srila Prabhupada goes into even greater detail about that particular meeting at the end of the first chapter of the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam. It's in a section at the very end. It's called, Prabhupada calls it additional notes for the chapter. And in that particular part, Prabhupada says that Narada Muni first descended from the heavenly planets to the forest of Mathura, and from there he sent a messenger to Kamsa that he was coming to see him. It's really interesting. And when the messenger approached Kamsa and informed him of Narada's arrival, Kamsa was very happy. And when Narada arrived, Kamsa came out of his palace to receive him. And on that occasion, Narada Muni is described as being bright as the sun, as powerful as fire, and free from all tinges of sinful activities. Beautiful description of a sadhu. As bright as the sun, as powerful as fire, and free from all tinges of sinful activities. So Srila Prabhupada says that Kamsa accepted Narada Muni as his guest. He offered him respectful obeisances, and he gave him a golden seat. It's described that seat was as brilliant as the sun. But then Narada spoke with Kamsa very frankly. And he said, and I quote to Kamsa, "My dear hero, you have satisfied me with a proper reception, and therefore I shall tell you something very secret and confidential. While I was coming here from Nanda Kanana through the Chaitra Rata forest, I saw a great meeting of the demigods, who followed me to Sumeru Parvata. We traveled through many holy places, and finally we saw the holy Ganges. While Lord Brahma was consulting the other demigods at the top of Mount Sumeru, I was also present with my stringed instrument, the veena. I should tell you confidentially, Kamsa, that the meeting was held just to plan to kill asuras, headed by you. You have a younger sister named Devaki, and it is a fact that her 8th son will kill you." So this prophecy came true, as we learned in our last class. Actually, it's said that whatever a great soul like Narada Muni says, or whatever desires a great soul has, it will come true without a doubt. In a lecture on September 30th, 1968, Prabhupada said in the class, God's name is Satya Sankalpa. Satya Sankalpa means that whatever he thinks, immediately it is present. Not only God, but those who have attained yogic perfection. They cannot desire like God, but almost. Such a transcendentalist, if he desires something that I want this, immediately it is there. This is called Satya Sankalpa, unquote. So the devotee has special powers that what they desire will come to pass. The Chandogya Upanishad 871 mentions 8 symptoms of a perfected soul. The verse goes, a person should search out a jivan mukta, a perfected soul, who is seen to possess these 8 symptoms. Apahata papa, that person will be free from all sinful activity and the nescience of Maya. Vijara, he'll be free from the miseries of old age and decay. Vrimityu, that person has conquered death and rebirth. Vishoka, that jivan mukta is beyond material happiness and distress. Vighatasa, that he no longer has any desires for material enjoyment. Apipata, has no desire other than the service of the Lord. Satyakama, his desires are always faultless and dedicated to the supreme truth, Sri Krishna. And the last one is of interest to us today. Satya Sankalpa, his wishes are always fulfilled by the grace of Krishna. Wishes, his desires, what he states. So Narada Muni told Kamsa, you're going to die. And why did he come and tell him that information? Prabhupada mentions in the chapter 39 of the Krishna book, because Krishna wanted to, Narada Muni wanted to accelerate Krishna's pastimes, to get things moving, so to speak. So when Kamsa heard the voice in the sky and had that meeting with the Narada Muni, he started sending more demons to Vrindavan, and the whole thing was accelerated like that. So, besides this action Narada Muni took to expedite Krishna's pastimes, I was thinking that he plays many roles throughout the entire span of Vedic culture. He's always popping up here and there in Vedic culture. In the distant past, in the recent past, and we could say even at the present moment. He's a very, very unique personality. In the distant past, we hear how he was the guru of many great personalities. We're going way back now in time. Vyasa, Valmiki, Dhruva. He was the spiritual master of Prahlad Maharaj, many others. And in more recent history, because Purana means that we're going back to ancient history of India, so more recent in history is 500 years ago. We know that in Chaitanya Leela, he was Srivas Pandit. He's one of the members of the Panchatattva. And in even more recent history, like our history, you say the history of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, he's also been very much present and available. Like, really? How so? Well, during Prabhupada's presence with us, I did some research and I found out there's many times that Narada Muni was present during Srila Prabhupada's glorious spreading of the Sankirtan movement. My godsister Mahavishnu Priyadasi, she remembers how in May 1975 in ISKCON's temple in Hawaii, one morning while giving Srimad Bhagavatam class, Prabhupada just paused and he froze in mid-sentence. And he looked stunned. He was stunned for more than a minute. And witnessing this, all the devotees began chanting Hare Krishna very softly, waiting for Prabhupada to come back to external consciousness. And when Prabhupada did, he looked at the devotees and he simply said, Narada Muni was just here. Wow. Then he continued on with the class, exactly at the point from where he'd left off, as if nothing had happened. Well, something really amazing had happened, but only Prabhupada could see. Another time in New York in 1967, after a program at a place called a very Fisher Hall, Prabhupada nonchalantly said to Brahmananda Prabhu that Narada Muni, Lord Brahma, and Lord Shiva, and Sukadev Goswami had all attended the function. Brahmananda Prabhu told me that one time. Narada Muni, Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and Sukadev Goswami had attended the function. What is this Krishna conscious movement? And in New York in the mid-1970s, at our temple on 55th Street, around the time of a New York Rath Yatra, Prabhupada and several disciples took the temple elevator from the ground floor up to Prabhupada's quarters. And as they were exiting, Prabhupada turned to the devotees and asked, "Did you all see Narada Muni in the elevator?" And of course no one did, but Prabhupada saw him. Another time in our temple in Los Angeles, as Prabhupada was lecturing, devotees say a very curious looking person entered the temple, apparently intoxicated, and began observing the devotees. And Srila Prabhupada stopped lecturing and sat smiling. As the gentleman was, because he was intoxicated, he was politely escorted out. And then before continuing with his lecture, Prabhupada said, "Oh, that was Narada Muni. He came to see the Malechas listening to Srimad Bhagavatam. He also visits you during street Sankirtan." So of course, what type of intoxication was he under? Intoxicated by the holy name and the glories of the Bhagavatam. He appeared like that. This is amazing. And in 1972, at the Henry Street Temple in New York City, an earlier temple, Prabhupada had just completed the Bhagavatam class and was walking towards the exit when suddenly he turned his head around towards the altar, and again he froze, staring at the altar. Now devotees who were present, they say that he stood like that for several minutes, actually. And then Prabhupada returned to our level of consciousness, and he continued to the door out to go outside the temple room with his servant Nanda Kumar Das. And everyone in the temple knew that something extraordinary had happened because Prabhupada was just staring at the altar. So later that servant, Nanda Kumar Das, he came out of Prabhupada's room and he went downstairs where all the devotees were waiting. They said, "What had happened?" And Nanda Kumar said that Prabhupada had said that, he said, "Did you not see? Narada Muni was standing on the altar." Then Prabhupada said, "When I asked him, 'Why have you come?' Narada Muni replied, 'I have come to see the wretches chant the holy names of Krishna.'" My godbrother Keshavadi Goswami said he investigated this Leela and he confirmed it was actually true. That's what happened in the temple. And that's what Prabhupada said. "I've come to see the wretches chant the holy names of God." It wasn't that Narada Muni was criticizing us. He was just amazed that we who were, you could say, products of Kali Yuga, had taken this chanting so seriously, and were chanting from our hearts. And there's more, actually. One time, Yamuna Devi told the pastime how in London in 1969, after Prabhupada had given a public lecture in a public hall, she was leading, Prabhupada asked her to lead kirtan with the harmonium on the stage. And she said, all of a sudden, Prabhupada's voice she said, cut through the auditorium with the potency of Lord Nrsimha, right in the middle of her chanting. And he was singing, Narada Muni, Bhajaya Vina, Radhika Ramana Namane. It's a song glorifying Narada Muni. But he signaled her to carry on chanting Hare Krishna, while he continues singing that prayer very loudly, glorifying Narada Muni in his microphone. And after a while, he started singing Hare Krishna along with Jamuna. So she recounts that all the devotees were aware that something, again, inexplicable, something amazing was happening. She used to describe those type of things. Yamuna would say they were magic moments. And she said all the devotees were literally jumping off the ground, leaping into the air. And she said even the audience went wild. They were all chanting and dancing too. So the next morning, Yamuna asked Srila Prabhupada what had happened the previous night. And Prabhupada said, you didn't see? Narada Muni came to our kirtan. And she said, no, I didn't see him. And Prabhupada continued, yes, Narada Muni came. And let me remember, my god sister Danishta Devi Dasi remembers how in London at our old Bury Place temple, I also visited that temple in the early days, Prabhupada told devotees to put a small asana on the altar for Narada Muni because he was attending the kirtans. And she also related that once in the Berkeley temple in California in America, Prabhupada was giving a darshan, or let's say he was answering various questions from newspaper reporters. And some newspaper reporters were there, and Prabhupada was just answering their questions. When all of a sudden Prabhupada looked up over everyone's head into the corner and he said, oh, Narada Muni has come. So in the distant past, Narada Muni was very much involved in the dissemination of what we now call Krishna consciousness. So many exalted personalities were his disciples. And the same was true 500 years ago. He was very much present in Chaitanya Leela as a member of the Panchatattva. And as we've said, that's certainly true also during Prabhupada's time. And I think it's safe to say the same is even true today. That's a pretty bold statement. Narada Muni is present in the international, somehow observing us, and watching us, inspiring us today, personally, in our activities around the world. I can say yes. But what's the authoritative Shastra that says so? We know because Narada Muni's famous declaration to Bhakti Devi at the beginning of Kali Yuga. It's so dear to Gaudiya Vaishnavas. It's there in the Bhagavat Mahatmya in the Padma Purana. He says, Anya dharmams tiraskritya puriskritya mohotsavahan yadi pravataye natvam tadadasho harer nahi. He says to Bhakti Devi, the idea is that she's pretty much ignored in Kali Yuga, or she was going to be very much ignored in Kali Yuga, so he came across her, she was lamenting. So he said, "O beautiful lady, beautiful faced lady, there is no age equal to Kali Yuga. In this age, I will personally preach your glories in each and every home and establish you within the hearts of each and every individual. Hear my vow now, giving priority to devotional festivals over all other forms of religiosity. If I do not spread you everywhere on the earth, then I shall no longer be known as a servant of Hari. The living entities that will be born in this age of Kali will be devotees who attain the abode of Hari without any hindrances, even if they are sinners." So he was describing what we're doing. We have these big mahotsavas. We have these big festivals, many festivals every morning in our temples with the morning program, festivals on the streets by chanting Hare Krishna. The Harinam itself, you could say, is a little festival. And certainly we have many festivals for the public, which I'm sure Narada Muni is particularly interested in. Ratha Yatra, which Prabhupada began in the West and now is most major cities of the world, different festivals of India and this and that, and the Polski tour. Based on that proclamation, actually for the last 30 years, Narada Muni, he's been the patron saint of our Festival of India tour in Poland. And we, all the devotees, past and present, we've always felt not only his blessings, you could say, but we've actually felt his presence on the tour. And I can say that over the past, going on 10 months of this world pandemic, which stole from us a whole summer of festivals that we were going to do in Poland and Ukraine and beyond, I've been praying very fervently to Narada Muni, our patron saint, to let us return to the field of battle as quickly as possible. So all glories to Narada Muni. Present in Krishna's Leela to tell Kamsa, you're going to die. And present in Mahaprabhu's Leelas and present in Prabhupada's Leelas and present even today. So back to Mathura. So yes, Narada Muni's prophecy came true, and the evil tyrant demon Kamsa was killed. Now, what happened afterwards, that's the subject matter of today's lecture, actually. It's really, really interesting. And it's quite deep at the same time. Like, what happened after Kamsa was killed? What did the people of Mathura do? What did Krishna do? What did all the Brajabasis who had accompanied Krishna to Mathura for the wrestling match, like, what happened to everybody? So we did some research and we found out. And so after the wrestling match, while the wives of Kamsa were lamenting their husband's death, Krishna met with his mother and father Vasuda and Devaki. They had given birth to him in the prison of Kamsa, and he removed their chains. Kamsa had put them in chains years before, because Krishna came to Mathura when he was around 16, so they'd been in chains for 16 years. And he undid their chains. Sometimes devotees have to undergo great difficulties in Krishna's pastimes. One of Krishna's pastimes is Mahaprabhu's pastimes of spreading the Sankirtan movement. So we have to be prepared sometimes to undergo some austerities. So Krishna took off the chains of Vasudeva and Devaki. And then, as we mentioned, he met with members of the Yadu dynasty, who were basically all his relatives. And at that meeting, it's described that Nanda Maharaj introduced the elder members of the Yadu dynasty to Krishna and Balaram, and Akrura, he comes back in the picture, he introduced the younger members of the Yadu dynasty to Krishna and Balaram. Big meeting, all the members of the Yadu dynasty. And the acharyas say that Ugrasen, who was the father of Kamsa, who had been overthrown by Kamsa, he was the last one to arrive at the meeting. Why? He was previously the king. But he was the last one to come. And the Shastra says because he was a little shy, a little embarrassed by the sins of his wicked son. Now, as we said, Ugrasen had been king before Kamsa, so it was only natural for him to, you could say, to resume his duties, but he felt that being the father of an offender like Kamsa disqualified him from resuming his duties as king. So when the subject matter came up, who's going to replace Kamsa, Ugrasena proposed Krishna should be installed as the king. Krishna. Everyone, yeah, wow, Krishna, you be the king. But then Krishna, who was actually a nephew of Kamsa, he said, how can a person like me, who killed my very own uncle, rule over Mathura? And at that point, everyone's hopes were dashed. And the meeting went silent. But Mathura couldn't remain without a king for long, because as we know, there were still many, many demons roaming the land. So after some time, Krishna said something stunning. I was stunned when I read it. Krishna spoke up. He broke the silence. He said, "My dear Ugrasena, if you agree to be the protector of this land," meaning if you agree to be the king, "I will stay in Mathura to serve you and carry out your orders. Otherwise, I will return to Braja and the happiness that awaits me there." So everyone turned towards Ugrasena to see what his reply was, because at the beginning of the meeting, he didn't have any inclination. But Ugrasena definitely did not want to become held responsible for causing Krishna to leave Mathura. So he lowered his head and he spoke very softly, and he accepted Krishna's proposal. He would be king based on Krishna's promise that he would stay and serve Ugrasena in Mathura for their whole lives. So this news quickly spread throughout the city. And the citizens of Mathura were overjoyed to have Ugrasena back as their righteous, God-conscious king, but they were even more happy to learn that Krishna was going to be permanently in their city. After all, he'd spent 16 years in Braj, and now he was theirs. But when the Brajabasis, who had accompanied Krishna and Balaram to Mathura for the wrestling match, heard this news, they were devastated. They all just fainted. When they came to consciousness, they were all saying the same thing. Krishna's not coming back to Vrindavan, but he promised us all he would. He promised he would come back. We were going to go back with him. And then the painful decision came, should they go back to Vrindavan or stay with Krishna in Mathura? It's getting complicated here. Love is complicated. So the many decisions, big and small, that we have to make in our lives in this world, pale in comparison to these choices that the Brajavasis had. Actually, everything in this world that we take to be so important pales in comparison to even a speck of dust in Sri Vrindavan Dham. But in reality, Nanda Maharaj had a kingdom to rule in Vrindavan. We talked extensively about Nandagram in a previous lecture, and all his services he did and the pastimes that took place there. That's where Krishna lived. So he had a kingdom to rule. So Nanda Baba, he couldn't stay in Mathura indefinitely. So it's described sooner or later the day would come that he and his son Krishna would have to part ways. Krishna was going to stay according to his vow in Mathura, and Nanda Baba would have to go back to Vrindavan. And it's described that Nanda Maharaj was tormented by the idea of being separated from Krishna. And of course, Krishna himself was overwhelmed by the prospect of, never seeing the Brajabasis ever again. There's a beautiful quotation in the Shastra. It says, like the aroma of flowers, the buzzing of bees, or the mist at dawn, Krishna's transcendental anguish filled the atmosphere of Mathura. Like the aroma of flowers, the buzzing of bees, or the mist at dawn, Krishna's transcendental anguish filled the atmosphere of Mathura. Now, what about the Brajabasis in Vrindavan? When Krishna had been in Mathura, they had been waiting anxiously for him to return, and there had been regular communication between Mathura and Vrindavan. I mean, Mother Yashoda was sending prasadam, and the carriers were coming back with, the pastimes. The Brajabasis were well informed of Krishna's victories over Kuvalyapita, the wrestlers, Kamsa, but they just missed him and wanted him back. That was their mood. And Krishna was aware of this, and the fact that they were suffering in his absence. They were suffering in separation. For example, he heard that neither Mother Yashoda or any of her helpers had eaten since Krishna's departure. And all the animals in Vrindavan continually cried in a chorus of sorrow that made the trees of Vrindavan shed their leaves and flowers in a mood of separation. Whew. The animals continually cried in a chorus of sorrow that made the trees of Vrindavan shed their leaves and flowers in a mood of separation. Nevertheless, Krishna stood firm in his pledge to stay in Mathura if Ugrasena remained as king. But then the plot thickens. The love becomes more complicated. The churning, the ocean of the nectar of devotion. One evening in Mathura, a scented message for Krishna arrived from the gopis. A scented message. And when Krishna read it, it's described his determination to stay in Mathura and keep his promise to Maharaj Ugrasena crumbled like a sand castle in the tide, say the acharyas. Crumbled like a sand castle in the tide. And what did the letter say? What was the letter that was sent by the Radharani and the gopis from Vrindavan when they heard what's going on? They wrote, "O beloved, separation from you has confused our lives. Now the forest has become our home, and our home's a forest. Sandalwood burns our bodies, so we think fire will cool our limbs. We would welcome death to end our pain, but your bold promise to return has become an obstacle to such relief. What's more, every moment we are away from you feels like a millennium." So we often hear the residents of Vrindavan expressing themselves in this way, opening their hearts and revealing the pain they're feeling in separation from Krishna. And as a result, one might naturally think it's better to be with Krishna than to be separated from him. But actually the advanced devotee prefers this separation from Krishna. How could this possibly be so? Well, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains it so nicely, how it can be so. In his commentary to Ujjvala Nilamani, it's a book written by Rupa Goswami. So in Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary to that, he's revealing Krishna's mood in the matter of separation. Krishna's mood, Krishna says, quote, "If I had to choose between union and separation, I would prefer separation from my beloved, because in union I see her in only one place, whereas in separation my entire universe is filled with her." If I had to choose between union and separation, I would prefer separation from my beloved, because in union I see her only I see her in only one place, whereas in separation my entire universe is filled with her, thinking of her. This is Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur revealing this. So when Krishna heard that scented message, he crumbled like a sandcastle in the tide upon reading that letter. Actually, there's a lot of letters exchanged. As you go through the Bhakti Shastras, you see there's a lot of communication. Sometimes parrots take the message, sometimes couriers, the cowherd boys or the cowherd girls, they take a lot of messages exchanged between the divine couple and between Krishna and the gopis and so forth. Like handwritten letters. A handwritten letter is something you could say more personal, I guess you could say, than email. It's written in your own hand with your signature. But life's become more impersonal now, you could say, with the emails. Letters were better. I remember keeping letters from when I was away from home. My parents would send me letters, and I'd keep those letters. And friends would write me letters. I'd keep those letters. One time, Prabhupada wrote a personal letter to me. I've told the story many times, but it just shows how letters are better than email. And Prabhupada wrote a letter, and I safeguarded that letter as the greatest treasure for many, many years. I kept it locked up, actually, with other valuables in a briefcase in my room in the Paris temple. And one day I came back from traveling Sankirtan, and I found that someone had broken into my room and the briefcase. And everything in the briefcase was gone, including that letter. I actually cried like a whole day and night. And I still feel an emptiness in my heart when I think about that letter that Prabhupada had written me. But I'd long ago memorized it, and that's kind of a solace, I guess you could say. I'll share it with you. Prabhupada wrote, "My dear Bhakta Brian, please accept my blessings. I want to thank you for your kind donation of $10 towards my newly formed book trust. I have information from your temple authorities that you are doing very nicely in Krishna consciousness. My request to you is that you continue to chant your 16 rounds every day and follow the 4 regulative principles. Also, always follow in the footsteps of advanced devotees. And in due course of time, I will be very happy to accept you as my duly initiated disciple. I very much appreciated your feelings of separation from me. I am also feeling separation from my spiritual master, but I always feel that he's watching over and protecting me. Hoping this meets you in the best of health. Your ever well-wisher, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami." It's like etched in heart. It is etched in my heart. Etched in stone in my heart. So letters, and we can imagine, on Krishna wrote you a letter, or the gopis wrote you a letter, whatever. Someday that may happen. I was actually reading the other day that Radharani keeps the letters that Krishna sends her. Really? Yes. Rupa Goswami confirms this in Padyavali 191. He's describing how a messenger is telling Krishna what Radharani did with a letter he'd sent to her. Quote, the messenger says to Krishna, "Radha taught her caged parrot to recite the words of your letter. She turned your letter into a song to the accompaniment of her flute and veena." So anyway, after reading the sent letter, Krishna turned to Balaram and he said, "Oh brother, now I must return to Braj. Won't you help me by remaining in Mathura?" Krishna's kind of trying to get out of it. "Now I must return to Braj. Won't you help me by you remaining here in Mathura?" Balaram was shocked. He replied, "If you leave me here, Krishna, I will die and be of no use to anyone." So Krishna said, "Well then what do we do?" And Balaram replied, "Well, now that everyone is so obedient to the new king Ugrasena, we should just go ahead and inform everyone we've decided to return to Braja with Nanda Maharaj and the Brajabasis who came with us." So Krishna sat pondering Balaram's suggestion for a long time, and then he agreed. So the next day, Krishna and Balaram called for a general assembly of the members of the Yadu dynasty were there, and all the elders in Mathura, to inform them of their decision that they're going back to Braj. Krishna's being torn between the love of different devotees. So nice. But in that assembly, they made sure that Vasudev, Krishna's father, was not informed. Yeah, they didn't want him to know that they would be returning to Braja, because they knew that that would break Vasudev's heart, because Vasudeva and Devaki, they stay in Mathura. So that assembly, Krishna said he had decided that he would return to Vrindavan. And everyone in the assembly was mortified. He'd made a deal with King Ugrasena that he was going to stay as long as Ugrasena was the king. How could he break his promise? Many devotees ask Krishna that. The gopis also ask Krishna like that. But the deeper theme of separation makes the heart grow fonder, as we've discussed many times. So they're saying, how you can leave? Ugrasena is the king, you promised. So after a long silence, people were quiet and speaking up, and then quiet, nobody knew what to do. Vikudru, an older member of the Yadu dynasty, and a very respected elder of Mathura, he rose to his feet and he said, Krishna, previously we had one enemy, Kamsa, but let me point out that now all his friends and relatives, like Jarasandha, have become our worst enemies. The members of the Yadu dynasty, your dynasty, are still dependent upon your protection. The Brajabasis are no longer in danger. After all, Vrindavan's just a small village. There's nothing to worry. So stay here in Mathura as you pledged. Please don't abandon your duty. Now Krishna was silent. He couldn't argue with the logic of Vikudru's statement, but neither could he forget the loving sentiment of the Braja Gopis. So he remained determined to return to Braj. So he quickly left the assembly with Balaram and went to see his parents, Vasudeva and Devaki. He wanted to inform them, despite the objection, he intended to return to Vrindavan. So he told them, Vasudeva and Devaki. But they didn't agree. They said, Krishna, we have waited so long to reclaim you. Will you now reject us and go away? So hearing this, Krishna and Balaram retreated to it's described a quiet garden to reflect on what to do. And Krishna said to Balaram, Balaram, maybe we should stay in Mathura. It's not auspicious to ignore the wishes of one's superiors. We must remember the example how Ram gave up the throne at his father's request. He and Sita went into exile and suffered many hardships out of respect for their superiors. And then Balaram took Krishna's hand and he said, my dear brother, you are being pulled here and there by the love of your devotees. I think it's best if we now approach our father Nanda Maharaj and ask his advice. So now, the two brothers went to see Nanda Maharaj. And at their meeting, at their meeting with Nanda Maharaj, Krishna explained the dilemma. The Brajabasis wanted him and Balaram to come home. The people of Mathura wanted them to stay in Mathura, and Vasudeva and Devaki also wanted them to remain in Mathura. So yeah, it's complicated. Sometimes it's described that the path of love in Vrindavan is crooked. Krishna has to be there, then he has to be there, then he's there, and then he has to say this to this one and say that to that one and cover up here. And Rupa Goswami likes to use this term crooked. In Ujvala Nilamani Shringara Beda Katana, text number 102, he describes this transcendental crookedness. He says, Radha was as dear to Krishna as he was to her. Yet for him, the path that leads to love was crooked, slippery, and fraught with transcendental difficulty. Unquote. So after hearing Krishna's dilemma, Nanda Maharaj thought carefully for some time, and then he said, and I quote, O son, to be frank with you, I am afraid for Mathura because of the many demons who are indeed inimical to the Yadus. But I am also afraid for the Brajabasis because of what might happen to them in separation from you. We must certainly help Vasudeva and our kin. It was for this reason that I allowed you to come here for the wrestling competition. It is a fact. King Dasharatha sent his young sons to protect the sages. But, then he hesitated. Later he sent Ram to the forest for 14 years, and he died of a broken heart. As Krishna's father, Nanda Maharaj, was strongly identifying with King Dasharatha. And so Nanda Maharaj began to cry. How can I be separated from Krishna? And as he pulled Krishna to his chest, he repeatedly stroked his face. And then Krishna spoke up. Krishna said, Father, he was sobbing, Father, let me kill the rascals who threaten Mathura. Then I will quickly return to Braj. That seemed to be the solution. Father, let me kill the rascals who threaten Mathura. Then I will quickly return to Braj. But Nanda Maharaj couldn't entertain even a single thought of separation. So he said, so then all the Brajabasis that have come with me to Mathura will stay with me here in Mathura? And Krishna protested. He said, Father, how's that possible? Mother could no more live without you than without me. You have to go home. But Nanda Maharaj said, no, I will bring Mother Yasoda here, and then she will cook for you every day. So it's described Krishna was wiping away his tears. And he said to his father, but Vrindavan cannot exist without Mother Yasoda. The Brajabasis will perish without their king and queen, you and Yasoda. So Nanda Maharaj, he proposed, then I will bring all the cows and all the people here to Mathura. And Krishna's eyes opened very wide and he said, O king, the gardens and groves of Mathura cannot possibly accommodate every cow under your protection. We know that Nanda Maharaj had 900,000 cows. So considering all these factors, Krishna said, my plan now is that I will kill all the demons. And once the demons are dead, I will come back to Vrindavan. For there is no happiness for me outside of your loving glance and the pastures and the forests of Braj. Then Krishna took both hands of his father and he said, now you should all return to Braj, dear father. We shall come to see you, our dear relatives who suffer in separation from us, as soon as we can. So Nanda Maharaj, he sat and he thought about Krishna's proposal for a long time. Love matters take a lot of deep thought and consideration. The transcendental platform. And Nanda Baba finally said, Krishna, how will I make your mother understand this plan? How will I make your mother understand this plan of yours? So Krishna replied, I will send her a letter. And immediately he wrote a letter to her with his own hand. And then he read it aloud. And then he gave it to his coward friend Sridham to deliver to Mother Yasoda. And the letter said, I hope all of you have your tissues ready. The letter said, my dear mother, on the day I departed for Mathura, you offered me rice with milk. The next day, when I was in Mathura, you sent me roti with ghee. The next day you sent sweets soaked in sweet milk. In the days that followed, you sent me other cooked foods, all the while thinking that it was just a dream. But my dearest mother, I can testify, it was not a dream, it was reality. You served and I ate. Please, therefore, abandon your vow of not eating until you see me again, for I am always present with you. If you insist on not eating, however, then I too will fast. So please be patient. As soon as I have killed the demons burdening the earth and harassing our family, I will return to Braj, and I will never leave again. Hare Krishna. So the Acharyas say that this historic letter not only was meant to reassure Krishna's mother that she would see him again, but also to reassure all the Brajabasis that one day, as he originally promised the Brajagopis, he would return to Vrindavan. And the Acharyas say that, it's very nice, according to the strength of their love for him, each of the Brajabasis could feel Krishna's presence in Braja in their own ways. According to the strength of their love for him, each of the Brajabasis would feel Krishna's presence in Braja in their own ways. And I was thinking that in the same way, according to our love and attachment to Srila Prabhupada, we as members of ISKCON, we also feel his presence in our lives, isn't it? Prabhupada said one time, he lives forever by his divine instructions, and the follower lives with him. So to be a member of ISKCON means to adhere to Srila Prabhupada as our founder Acharya, his instructions, his will, his desires. And in that way we live with him. We feel, all of us, we feel that connection. First generation, second generation, third generation, we feel Prabhupada's presence in our lives, tangibly. For example, it's not uncommon for ISKCON devotees to see Srila Prabhupada in dreams. I travel extensively, and many times devotees, they share with me the dreams they've had of Prabhupada, and they're very nice dreams. The dreams are as if, they're interactions like Prabhupada had with us when he was here. A couple of years ago, a devotee from New Vrindavan, she told me that she said to Prabhupada, one of my god sisters, "Oh Prabhupada, I had a dream about you." This was in the 1970s. "Oh Prabhupada, I had a dream about you." And Prabhupada said to her, "When I am here, you take instruction from me directly, but once I have left, then I can come to you in dreams." That's what he said. "When I am here, you take instruction from me directly, but once I have left, then I can come to you in dreams." Hayagriva Prabhu, an early founding member of ISKCON, wrote that Srila Prabhupada once told him, "Dreams are nonsense. But when you dream of the spiritual master or Krishna," he said, "that's very nice. Dreams are nonsense. But when you dream of Krishna, the spiritual master, that is very nice." And again, we often hear about devotees nowadays dreaming of Prabhupada. The other day, my disciple, Brajachandrika Dasi, she shared a dream with me recently that she had of Prabhupada, that she was following behind Srila Prabhupada as he was chanting japa on a morning walk. And when he noticed her, he stopped and he spoke to her briefly, encouraging her in her Krishna consciousness. And she started crying in the dream, and she woke up crying, remembering the instructions. So who knows? It's all the transcendental platform. A couple of days ago, I dreamt that I was driving Srila Prabhupada in a car back from a program somewhere in the world. And as I was driving, I was looking in the mirror, the rear view mirror, and I was looking at Prabhupada. He was chanting, "Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Ram, Ram, Hare." And I was thinking in the dream, this is always what I wanted to do, personal service for His Divine Grace. And when we got to the place where Srila Prabhupada was staying, I got out of the car, opened the door, and escorted him into his room. And then it seemed like Prabhupada had to do a program or give a lecture a little bit later, but he was just resting on his bed. And I sat down waiting for further orders. And after a few minutes, I gathered the courage and I said, Srila Prabhupada, may I ask you a question? And he replied, yes, you may. And I said, Srila Prabhupada, would you like a foot massage? Prabhupada, he smiled softly and he said, yes, that would be nice. You can do. You can do. But then you go back to your preaching. So I very carefully began to massage his lotus feet and I woke up. And when I woke up, I noticed I was smiling. Bhajatamrika, she was crying and I was smiling, so this is something special. We can feel Prabhupada's blessings in our lives as we continue with our efforts to spread the Sankirtan movement all over the world. How's it possible for us to do that? Prabhupada said one time, Lord Ram conquered Lanka with monkeys and bears. They said, I am conquering the world with my disciples. So we're not very qualified, but by His grace we're becoming qualified, and we know that the ability to follow out His instructions is coming by His grace. He's our spiritual strength. So after Krishna had read his letter to Mother Yasoda out loud, Nanda Maharaj and all the Brajabasis who had accompanied him to Mathura prepared to go back to Vrindavan. There was no need to stay in Mathura any longer because they knew that very soon Krishna himself would leave Mathura to rid the earth of all the demons who had posed a threat to his devotees. So they decided to leave. But just before they all left, Krishna spoke lovingly to each and every Brajabasi who had accompanied Nanda Maharaj to Mathura. It's described he embraced each one of them, gave them personal gifts, and sent gifts with them to give to devotees, his devotees back in Vrindavan, especially gifts for Mother Yashoda and the Braja Gopis. And then they left. Nanda Maharaj and the cowherd men, their bullock carts, they left. And Krishna stood on the road for a while, watching them go. But then it's written that he turned around and walked in the opposite direction. Quote, his mind reeling with confusion, his ears ringing with thunderous noise, his eyes streaming with tears. Krishna kept walking faster and faster, as if trying to escape the piercing pain in his heart. Balaram, however, accompanied the Brajabasis for some distance until Nanda Maharaj turned back and he said with great difficulty, Balaram, my son, now that Krishna, the life of our life, will depart Mathura, we will continue on our way alone. Follow your brother. Never let him out of your sight. Your mother has often told you this. I now remind you on her behalf. So Lord Balaram, I'm just giving this summary. There's so many details. He tore himself away from the Vrajavasis and took leave, and he began searching for Krishna because he didn't know where Krishna was. Krishna just kind of wandered in despair around Mathura. And finally Balaram found Krishna at the house of Vasuda and Devaki. And there together, Krishna and Balaram, they went to a secluded garden. And with no one else in sight, it's described, they embraced and cried uncontrollably well into the night. Hare Krishna. So that was some nice information, some nice pastimes we found through further research from our acharyas and our bhakti shastras. It's all there. So I think we've churned the ocean of the nectar of devotion sufficiently for today. Of course, svadhu, svadhu, pade, pade. We could go on and on, couldn't we? And this is what we're meant to do. We must spend time every day like this, reading Prabhupada's books, hearing Prabhupada's lectures, studying the commentaries of various acharyas from different angles, a vision, chanting Hare Krishna, seeing our beautiful Vrindavan deities, Radha and Krishna, Krishna Balaram, sometimes coming to Vrindavan and seeing the playground of God, our original home, which gives us an idea of what it's like to be back in Goloka Vrindavan, and realizing that nothing in this world compares with what we're discussing, and coming gradually to understand. So this concludes our discussions on Krishna's pastimes in Mathura. Sadly, we'll be leaving Mathura now, but happily we'll be going back to our beloved Sri Vrindavan Dham with our lectures. This is Tuesday. On Friday, we'll be speaking about Govardhan Hill, because the following Monday is Govardhan Puja, at least here in India, but it's close enough so we can prepare ourselves, be prepared. In our series, we have spoken extensively on Govardhan Hill, but we found more nectar, exciting details that we haven't shared before. They've been there for hundreds of years, but seek and ye shall find. So with the help of many of my godbrothers, Shivaram Maharaj and Radha Govinda Maharaj, and other devotees, Amarendra Prabhu in America, and Hari Parshad Prabhu, they're like my mentors, my counselors. I'm just repeating what they say, basically, and confirming with them what I find in my research in the Shastras. It's team. It's a team effort to get back home, back to Godhead. So I'll be sharing that, more about Govardhan Hill with you. I think I'll also consult with my very dear godbrother Charatma Prabhu. He's definitely a Govardhan Bhakta, and perhaps he can share with us what he's learned this year and his research and his memories of our wonderful Kartik Parikramas around Giriraj Govardhan. But before leaving the sacred dham of Mathura, which is so dear to Krishna and Krishna's devotees, let us offer our respects one more time to that transcendental abode by reading from the sacred teachings of Srila Sanatana Goswami in his Brihat Bhagavatamritam, published by our Bhaktivedanta Book Trust. Chapter 1, text number 4, there's a beautiful verse about Mathura, and in the purport, there's several other verses glorifying Mathura. So I will conclude like this. All glories to the goddess Mathura Devi, the best of holy cities. She enchants the mind. She is most dear to the enemy of Kamsa, and she is adorned with the Lord's birthplace. The city of Mathura is acclaimed throughout the world for dispelling misery and bestowing liberation and devotion, not to mention the various pastimes the Lord has played there. To those who have material desires, Mathura gives the three aims of human work: religiosity, economic development, and sense gratification. To those who want liberation, Mathura grants liberation. And to those rare souls who want pure devotion, Mathura gives pure devotion. What intelligent person, therefore, would not take shelter of Mathura? The reaction from a sin committed elsewhere can be dissolved when one visits a holy place of pilgrimage, whereas a sin committed at such a holy tirtha creates an irremovable diamond-hard shell to cover the sinner. But the reaction from a sin committed in Mathura can be done away with in Mathura itself. Mathura is therefore the most auspicious of holy cities, where sinful reactions do not persist. Whatever sinful reactions one may have occurred in the past, knowingly or unknowingly, are all destroyed in Mathura, along with one's pious and impious karma. Among the various holy cities like Kasi, Mathura is most auspicious because she bestows liberation upon human beings in four ways. In Mathura, they may attain liberation by birth, by vows of initiation, by death or by cremation. In other holy places, liberation is the greatest reward one can achieve. But in Mathura, one can gain what is prayed for by the liberated, devotional service to Lord Hari. Goodbye, Mathura Dham, but we will visit you again and again. And when we have our Kartik Parikrama, hopefully very soon, we'll take the devotees to your transcendental abode and hear your glories again. Now on to Vrindavan. Shri Shri Gauranitai ki, Shri Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shyama ki, Vrindavaneshwari Shrimati Radharani ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Goloka Vrindavan Dham ki. Back home, back to Godhead. Take all those fallen conditioned souls with us back to Prabhupada's lotus feet. Ki Jai Ho. Thank you. See you soon at the foot of Govardhan Hill. Hare Krishna.